Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 43. Editing feels almost like sculpting or a form of continuing the writing process. Sidney Pollack.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free audiobook from Audible. And today's show is sponsored by USC Film School's only online film course, Directing the Actor, taught by the legendary Nina Foch. You can download that at indiefilmhustle.com/USC. Today, guys, we're in for a treat. We've got a film distribution and marketing expert by the name of Jon Reiss. Jon wrote a book called Thinking Outside the Box Office, the ultimate guide to film distribution and marketing for the digital era. Now, Jon is very well known throughout the industry for his very unique techniques of doing kind of like a hybrid distribution and marketing strategy that helped him sell his movie Bomb It very well, and how he was able to do it. He was written up in Daily Variety as one of the top 10 digital directors to watch. He's also a music video director as well as a documentary and narrative director. And he's co-written two other books called Selling Your Film Without Selling Your Soul and Selling Your Film Outside the U.S. Digital Distribution for Europe. So Jon's a really interesting guy. He has amazing information. So I had to get him on the show to share that with the tribe. So sit back and relax and enjoy my interview with Jon Reiss. Hey, Jon, thank you so much for jumping on board on the Indie Film Hustle podcast. I really appreciate you taking out the time.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to do it.
Thanks so much, man. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about where you come from and what you're doing?
I come from Silicon Valley.
Okay.
And, I try to do this short, but ended up at a place called Target Video, which was a punk rock collective in San Francisco in the early 80s. And then kind of got interested in industrial culture and worked with these guys who make large remote control robots. Survival Research Laboratory, started doing documentaries of punk rock and them. And then I went to UCLA Film School, like so many people do. Mm-hmm. And out of film school, I did a bunch of music videos. Most notoriously was one for Nine Inch Nails. And then just kind of did what everyone does. You kind of like do things here, do things there. I directed a couple features, produced a feature, and then started even writing scripts based on my features. I started getting some script writing jobs. Cool. And then that kind of world dried up, and it was like I was really dying to make another film. So ended up making a film about graffiti all over the world. Mm-hmm. And which actually then that came out around when the distribution market collapsed. And
when you mean the distribution market, you mean like the market, or all of this, like distribution market in general?
Pretty much everything in general in 2007 collapsed, but especially in the independent film world. But it was also the beginning of the shrinkage of, even studio feature films. Mm-hmm. And I think it coincided with the financial market collapsing, but it was also, I think there was a bubble burst in the independent film world, especially. So, we didn't know and bought the film. We thought someone was going to buy it. We got a bunch of, we had the experience that most filmmakers have these days, a lot of low money offers or no money offers, and for all rights. And, now there's a lot more opportunities for filmmakers. It's still difficult to kind of pick the right path, I would say. Mm-hmm. But so I took the film out in a hybrid manner, and then people encouraged me to write about it because it seemed like I was doing something unique. And I also, when I started writing about it, it seemed like I had a skill of distilling what appeared really complex and opaque to most people was, I could explain it in a very clear manner. Okay. And so because of that, people suggested I write a book. And I wrote a book called Think Outside the Box Office, which is kind of like a manual on how to release your film, kind of a book I wish I had had when I released my film. And then since then, that kind of, since then I've been working with filmmakers and doing workshops and other writing and
just taking over the world in general.
Yeah, or one little slice of it.
A little corner, a little nugget, putting a dent in the indie film world, like Steve Jobs says. Put a dent in the universe. So can you break down, I think you went over it a little bit, but can you break down the story of what actually happened with Bomb It, which was your documentary?
Right. So basically, we took it to Tribeca, sold out. We turned away around 200 people per screening. Cool. It was crazy. I even documented that and, standing ovation. It's like we were going, oh, great, we're going to sell the movie.
Millions.
Not even millions. It's like, God, my investor's going to recoup.
Sure.
I'll maybe make a little money. Some good distributor's going to release it. Lots of people will see it, and then crickets, it's effectively crickets. And, that's when everyone started looking around and going, what the fuck is going on here? I think, it just started that cycle. So I don't know how much depth you want to get into it. We did have a DVD distributor and digital aggregator approach us, Cinedigm. So we actually went with them because, I had known them for a number of years. It was New Video at the time. Oh, yeah. And they were really good to work with. And then it was a matter of it's all filmmakers I still want to see my film in the theaters, and
of course,
how am I going to market this film? And some company came along and said they were going to release it theatrically, and I said, really? And even without any other rights? Yeah. And then that fell through, and so I ended up booking it myself.
You four-walled it?
No four walls. Very proud to say. No, okay. I booked. I functioned. I picked up the phone and I sold the film.
Oh, really? Now, can you explain a little bit about how you did that? Because that's a mystery to a lot of people, how to get a theatrical anything. So what did you actually do?
I just, it's probably a lot harder now because I think there's a lot of filmmakers. It's harder and it's easier because there's a lot of filmmakers trying to do it, but then there's a lot of bookers who will work with independent filmmakers. So, but, then you have to pay a little money, but you can still and it's also easier because you can also use Tug, for instance. I basically called, I had a pedigree of being in Tribeca, and I also got a New York Times critics pick
nice.
out of that. Or no, actually I didn't. We had a good quote from the New York Times because the critics pick came out during the theatrical release. So we didn't actually have that yet. And, I just had I had a plan of how I was going to get butts in seats. I was able to talk to them about my knowledge of who the audience was, how I was going to connect with them. I basically, they don't want to hear how great your film is. They want to hear that there's an audience and that you know how to get the audience into the theater. That's what they want to do. And then, I got a couple theaters, and then they connected me to some other theaters. And, once you kind of get into a little bit of a circuit, people go, okay, I'll try it. And we ended up doing 25 cities, I think.
Nice.
At the time was
for basically a documentary.
Yeah. For real, a documentary.
Yeah, for real, not basically for a real documentary with no big stars or anything like that. So it was just based on the merit of the film itself.
Yeah, and whatever salesmanship I potentially had,
right.
So what I was fighting against is I had a couple places that said, well, we'll give you one night. And it's like, no, I have to have a week. And, that's what's important to me, a real theatrical. And I was such an idiot then, to be honest.
Right.
I was just like a typical idiot filmmaker who thinks that a conventional theatrical release is what you have to have. And unfortunately, there's now certain things kind of set in stone about for certain kinds of distribution, you need certain kind of requirements. And so, for certain kinds of distribution deals, you actually do need a theatrical, a 7-week run. But what I discovered while doing Bomb It is really the power of events and one-night screenings. Because I had just been in Portland where, it was raining and, no one was in the theater. And it was and that was the first night of the opening night. And here the filmmaker was in town. And, it just... in retrospect, it probably wasn't the right theater for the film, and also the rain, and it's a theatrical small film, and just like there's fucking 5 people in the audience. Now it's super depressing.
Right.
But then I go to New Orleans, which was one of the cities that I was fighting doing a one-night screening, and finally I just said, "Fuck it, okay, I'll do it." And I got there, and there's lines around the block. They sold out the first screening. They added and sold out a second screening. And there was an article in the paper, and it was just kind of like, wow, there's something here. Like, and that's when I discovered the importance of scarcity, that, if people can only go and see it on one night, then, it makes it that much more special.
Interesting. Interesting.
And I still think that functions to some degree. I mean, now, years later, oh, excuse me. I am so sorry. I have not had any. I've had a tiny bit of caffeine today. I did.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I'm doing this meditation now where I can't eat or drink beforehand, and so
got it.
I wasn't able to have breakfast I wasn't able to do it until like 11. So I missed all my morning caffeine. So
fair enough. Fair enough. No worries.
This will all be in the podcast, right?
Of course. Of course.
So So
let me.
That's kind of how the theatrical went, and that's where I discovered events, and and it really got me thinking about now doing events for theatrical screenings is super sophisticated. So
right, of course,
it's really taken off.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the distribution myth out there, the golden ticket syndrome that so many filmmakers still carry from like the 90s?
I just can't fucking believe that people. Can I swear? I swear.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, okay, here's the deal. This will hopefully sober some people up. There's around 50,000 films that are made every year. Maybe on a good year, 100 of those. On a really good year, 100 of those get some kind of deal that makes financial sense in the United States. The golden ticket deal, maybe there's 3 to 5,
right?
Out of 50,000. So you kind of do the math. Okay. On top of that, you have to understand that, there's now about 700 years of video content uploaded to YouTube every month. Okay. And in addition, that every piece of content, book, music, whatever, that's almost every piece of content that's been created by humankind in the history of humankind is available to people. So what happens when there's a super glut of supply and demand is constant or slightly increasing? Price drops tremendously.
Right.
So you have to figure out how your film is going to dent that oversaturated media landscape. And you can't rely on someone else to do it for you.
Not anymore.
It's just
right.
like, especially if you have a drama or a comedy if you have a narrative film with no stars,
done. It's so rough.
Make it for a little bit of money, and then save money for distribution, because the chances are that someone's going to come and rescue you in distribution is next to nothing. And so, I mean, frankly, if you're in the film business for a golden ticket, you're in the wrong business.
Right.
They don't really, and the problem is that the success stories are always hyper publicized, and any deal is hyper publicized, and partially people want to celebrate, and partially people want to show, look, we're still in a viable business. But
well, it's like they say they always show the lottery winner, but they don't show the lottery losers, which is there's millions of them.
The vast majority. Yeah, exactly. Look at all the people who bought Willy Wonka chocolate bars and didn't get their ticket.
Right.
Thousands of dollars of that, millions of chocolate bars sold, and 5 golden tickets.
Like I come from post. I mean, I've been a post supervisor for 20 years, so I've been doing a lot. I know deliverables, and I've seen so many films come through my door, and anytime I see a drama come through the door that's no stars involved, and they're like, so what do you think I should do? I'm like, market, save some money, and marketing should be like your main thing.
I mean, I think there's a few of us who feel like they've coined the expression that distribution is easy, marketing is hard. Like,
Yeah,
getting your
perfect.
film out there is relatively easy.
Yep.
Getting people to want to see your film
It's
is the
super
tough
hard.
part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, so how do you think a filmmaker should think about marketing their films in today's online world?
It all focuses, it all goes to audience. Basically, like, to me, whenever I talk to a filmmaker, I mean, this is the four basic things I go over are, what are your goals? Like, what do you want from the film? Like, not every, there's a lot of filmmakers who it's not about, making money. Some of them need to recoup, some don't,
Right.
but there's other goals that, filmmakers have a variety of goals. And so there's a variety of paths that you can go to achieve those goals. And I know you spoke about marketing, but I'm just kind of going.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Here.
Yeah.
Then you have to look at your film, and like, what is unique about your film? Are there any, like, in terms of marketing, are there marketing hooks? And that's where, like, is there a cast? What kind of audience, what's unique about your film, and what's unique to the audience about your film? And some of that deals with, your title, how good is your film? Like, the one thing I also want to stress, if there's a lot of young filmmakers listening, that screen your film repeatedly to audiences, and especially the audience that you think your film is made for. And A, you may find out that that's not the audience that you made your film for. B, you might also get good feedback from that audience. Like, you need to screen your film repeatedly throughout the process, save people fresh eyes, show it to a few people at first, then a few more. Some people will come back and see it again, but most people won't. So really kind of like be careful about how many times you screen it and how many people come, especially to the early screenings, that you have to save some people for the end.
Got it.
But really make sure your film is as good as possible, because that's, in terms of marketing, that's going to be the biggest marketing hook, is having a really amazing film that people want to see. And so many filmmakers, I mean, I get a lot of edits where the first thing I say is like, are you locked? And, the first thing you should think about doing is cutting your film. It's way too long, or doesn't make sense, or something. So then is audience. And, that involves identifying your audience, finding out where your audience consumes media, finds out about films. So finding out, so who is your audience? What do they read? Then think about what kind of value you can provide to your audience besides the film itself. Like, what kind of extra content and assets do you have? What kind of experience can you provide to them, et cetera? So there's a whole bunch of things that you can think about in that regard. And then lastly, how does that audience consume media? And different audiences consume media in different ways. And so that's how you would, kind of develop your strategy of your distribution strategy along those lines. And then lastly are your resources. Like, what kind of resources do you have to release the film? And not only in terms of money, but also in time, like sweat equity, or just people. Like, and money does help buy people, but like, also, what is your time, and what kind of, how much time do you have to
invest in the marketing and getting the word out and the hustle and all that stuff.
Yeah. And then more and more these days, I've been, also talking to this in the context of people's filmmakers' careers. Like, where does this film sit in your, career pipeline? Is it like your first film that, is good, but there's certain things that you couldn't accomplish with it, and maybe, but you still want to get it out there, but you want to move on to another project? Or is this your magnum opus that you definitely need to get people to see, and et cetera? So that will also affect how you how
move forward, right?
More of like what path you choose. Just moving forward, but it's a matter of, there's a lot of different ways you can release a film, and it's a matter of like, how are you going to release that film?
So from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, is and this is something that most filmmakers don't do, is a lot of analyzing and actually thinking about the path, not just the making of the movie, which is what filmmakers generally all do. Is they just like, I'm just going to get that camera, I'm going to make my movie. But when the edit's done, they have no idea. And sometimes they'll just throw it out into the marketplace, if they even get it into the marketplace, to see what would happen. So they don't think about what part of this is in my career path, where's my audience? Is this a viable product for an audience? What audience is it? All these questions are not answered or even asked. So that's why so many, I think, filmmakers fail. And it's rough.
And then in my book, I kind of invented a crew position called the producer of marketing and distribution. Because so many, films need kind of like advice and work on these aspects of the film, but the crew is, doesn't have the skill set, doesn't have the time to deal with this. And so, I'm doing a couple things over the next couple of years that hopefully take place that, will help, kind of foster that crew position and help grow that and make it kind of something that, becomes part of, hopefully
the crew.
Every film. Yeah. Because, I also, kind of feel that in a sense, when you're done with your film, you're kind of half done. It's like I created this concept called the new 50-50, where 50% of your time and energy should be spent on creating the film, and the other 50% should be on connecting that film to an audience, which is all aspects of distribution and marketing. So, and that's not a hard and fast rule, but like if you look at any studio film, it's even probably, you make $100 million film and they spend $200 million marketing it.
That's very true.
That's like 35-65, we're in favor of marketing and distribution. And there's a lot of indie films that end up that way, especially super low budget ones, where much more is spent on the marketing and distribution than was ever spent on making the film.
Now, with film festivals, how you would suggest to leverage film festivals in a self-distribution strategy?
First of all, I wouldn't worry about it tremendously. I mean, festivals are fickle and it's highly competitive, but I generally, when you're in festivals, you're in release. So there's two basic paths. One is you can use festivals to help build up your audience, to then make the film more either attractive to certain distribution entities or build up some reviews, et cetera, some notability to help the release later. And then later you do a release, hopefully not too far from the festivals, but from the information you gathered during the release and whatever accolades, et cetera, you gain, not through the release, but through the festivals and the audience that you develop, you can, get, and then engage distribution. The other way, which is a little bit hard because it requires you to be pretty savvy and knowledgeable and prepare, is to actually fold the festivals into the distribution process so that, maybe, and even some people are doing this at Sundance these days, like a couple films a year do this at Sundance, where they actually use Sundance or a festival as their theatrical premiere. That's the launch of the film. And then either during the festival or shortly after, they offer it on VOD available, so that people who hear about it at the festival can then engage with the film.
Right. And leverage all the press that they got from a big festival like that.
Exactly. So you can modify that too, where you kind of like have a one or two festivals and then you're kind of ramping up, and then, the rest of your festivals are kind of like your theatrical release when your VOD starts, so it's very fluid.
So let me ask you another question. How crucial is it today, you think, to package ancillary products with on a film's website? Like if you're selling it on your website, like posters and hats and T-shirts and, along with a DVD or a VOD of your film, kind of like a George Lucas vibe.
Yeah, I think that depends on the film. I actually don't refer to those as ancillary. It's more merchandising.
Got it.
Merchandise. And I'm a big fan of that in general because depending on the film, you can make a fair amount of money that way, and it really depends on the audience, whether there's things that you can make that the audience is going to buy. If it's just a kind of conventional film, printing a bunch of posters and T-shirts, unless there's something special about the key art or the graphics or something, isn't going to mean a lot. But if there's like, Gary Hustwit is the, documentary filmmaker who's amazing at this, and he creates he makes films about, or he's made 3 films about design. And in his store, you can see this amazing range of products that he's created that people just love and eat up. So, and you can make a fair amount of money doing that.
Even more than selling the movie sometimes.
Yeah, we made more money selling posters of Vomit than selling the DVD off of our store. Now, the distributor sold more than that, but like we made much more money off of the posters than, off of the DVD sales.
Now, what avenues would you suggest to get the best audience engagement?
Wow. It all, it's like there's like 8 to 10 avenues of audience engagement, and it just depends on the film. If I was going to make a blanket statement, I think crowdfunding, if you're open to it, is a good source, is a good tool for marketing. Digital media is certainly important. And I don't just mean social media. That's a component. If you have a documentary, especially around a certain, specific audience that's organized, outreach is certainly important. Influencers are important. There's a lot that, kind of goes into it, and it all just depends on the film.
Yeah, it's all topic depending on if it's a documentary, if it's an action movie, it's a drama, or so on and so forth.
Horror film, like I'm working on a horror film now, and that's its own audience and its own, thing. So.
And now, do you have any tips on developing relationships with the audience once you have that audience?
Well, just to keep them engaged and to find, and certainly not to just talk about your film, but to talk about things that are interesting to them.
Create content. Good content that keeps them engaged.
Yeah. And it could be just like how you relate to them on social media. Could be photos. Could be what you create on Instagram. Could be because you're an artist. Think about like how your fans, and that's how you're going to create fans that are going to stay with you. On multiple projects.
So that would be that was my next question. How do you develop an audience to follow you from project to project, and instead of just doing like a one-off movie, which a lot of filmmakers will just start and like, okay, I'm just going to do all this press on this one movie, but then when that movie's gone, that audience is gone, unless you're building your name up as a brand or a company up as a brand.
Well, no, I do feel like filmmakers need to develop themselves, as a brand, as it were. Like, and a lot of filmmakers object to that, but. Brand, auteurs are brands.
Yeah, Woody Allen's a brand. Martin Scorsese's a brand.
Stole my line.
Yeah.
That's like I say that all the time.
Oh, do you really? I never. Yeah. Sorry.
Martin Scorsese's a brand.
Spielberg's a brand. All these guys are, of course.
Yeah. So, it's like you go to a Spielberg film, you generally know what you're going to get. Similar, like when you open a can of Coke, you know what you're going to get. So. You may not like that, but what you're trying to do is cultivate audience that's going to like and appreciate that.
Yeah, I kind of preach that with Woody Allen. He's one of these rare filmmakers who's been able. Well, he's the only filmmaker I know that's been able to make a film a year for like 30 years.
Right.
I mean, it's insane. Like other filmmakers look at him like how, and he does it because he has that formula. He makes it really low budget, has very great cast, but he's been able to develop. Everybody knows
he's also a prolific and talented writer too.
Correct, and he's Woody Allen. So he's built up that people go to see Woody Allen films. Regardless what they are, those he'll just show up. But if you gave him a budget of $150 million to make a movie, not a good investment.
Yeah,
generally. Yeah. So if you were making a film today, and I know I'm asking in a really broad spectrum. If you were making a film today, what would be broad steps that you can kind of a guide that you can give a filmmaker to get their film marketed and sold? Very broad steps, because I know that's a big question, and you could go on for days on that. But just like basic stuff.
The thing is like if you say if I'm making a film, which means that
you haven't started yet.
If I'm starting the process,
correct.
I mean, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. Is it depends on what your goal is.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's the first thing. Like, do I want to try to make a lot of money? Or do I want to, change the world, and so that's, I would really kind of like think about what my goals are. I would also look at, I'm just trying to give, more general helpful hits to people. I would think about the size of the potential audience, like who the potential audience is. And if the audience potential is small and you really have to be realistic, then you should really try to be conservative in your spend and what you spend money on. I would also definitely budget for distribution and marketing, and try to raise that money and set it aside, in the best of all possible worlds. If it's a script, I would make sure that the script is really in good shape before before shooting. Or you could do an improv thing, and it just depends. I don't want to be too restrictive or about how people work, but if you have a script, just make sure it's
tight.
It's tight, or at least it's good in some way, something excellent, something that needs to be made. And maybe it needs to be made just because you have to do it. But if you're getting a lot of feedback that it's not for a lot of people, then I'm not going to tell anyone not to do anything. Go make your film, but just realize that, the audience might be small and maybe you're going to knock it out of the park, but just be cautious about how you, proceed financially if that's if that's an issue for you. I would think about the film in relationship to, in my career, in terms of like, do I want to develop an audience? How am I going to go about developing an audience for myself that, I can bring from project to project? Not that it, in some cases it can be sustainable, but it can have many different kinds of value in all different ways throughout this process. So you really want to think about developing some, core fans, if you can, that are really engaged with your work.
Like that 1,000 True Fans article.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just make a really kick-ass film. And then
which is always always the bottom line of all of this conversation, is just make a good movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of it
also, I'd also think about, like, does it really need to be a movie? Like, what other, it's like, what other form, like, what is the form of content that's most suited to me as a creator, and is
web
that
series, short film,
or episodic. I'd rather use than web series.
Sure.
Although that market's kind of really glutted, but and you really have to do something kind of unique these days to stand out. Not that you always didn't, but you're not going to get anywhere relying on the novelty of that, because it's not novel.
Not anymore.
Right. So so those are some of the things I would say.
Now, what do you think? What are your feelings on the new self-distribution marketplaces like VHX, Gumroad, Vimeo Plus, as part of an online distribution strategy?
I mean, it all depends on the film and the path and the goals. So I think they're all great tools, and if you are inclined to do the work to kind of get people to buy from you directly, then I think they're great. Some people will do it and not spend that work and not really have that interest, and then kind of what's the point? But I think it's wonderful, especially internationally, when it's so hard to release films internationally, especially in smaller territories or like the vast majority of countries. It's great to have that ability to have the film out there. So I'm a big supporter of those, always have been. But again, it also always depends on what you're going to do. It can be a fair amount of work, so you have to make sure that you're really committed to that, and the reasoning for that, and why you want to do that as part of the process.
Now, you mentioned something earlier. I know the answer, but I want you to kind of explain to the audience what an aggregator is in regards to online distribution of VOD.
Sorry, say that again.
Can you explain what an aggregator is in VOD and online distribution to our audience?
So what an aggregator is, and that's, that term shifting a little bit. I mean, there's certain aggregators that are now what used to be called aggregators, who are pretty much considering themselves distributors. A lot of aggregators have become distributors, let's put it that way.
Okay.
So they're kind of functioning very similar. Are you hearing my dogs in the background? Is that bothering you, or is that okay?
It's fine. It's
okay.
They're in the distance.
Yeah, good. Just because I'm actually now in my garden, so because my office was getting a little warm and stuffy.
No worries.
So, and it's much nicer out here to talk out here.
Not a problem.
Just my dogs are a little annoying. So, an aggregator or distributor that functions, or a VOD specific distributor,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like maybe a better hybrid term for certain companies, they are, they're the people you're going to need in some shape or form to get your film up onto online platforms. Such as the standard online platforms, not the direct-to-fan ones, which you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Those I would classify as direct-to-fan platforms. So to get up onto the commercial platforms such as iTunes, Amazon, although Amazon you can do directly as well, Netflix, Hulu,
Mm-hmm.
the AVOD and SVOD platforms, you're going to need someone else, which is generally an aggregator or a distributor or VOD distributor to access them. And, the thing that you need to think about, like if you're all about being direct with the audience, creating a relationship with the audience, and you feel like you can sell to them and they'll buy from you, and you have something so precious to them that they will buy from you, potentially direct to fan is the way to go, because you're not going to get the email addresses from
Right.
iTunes. You're not going to get that audience connection. Chances are, though, most people like to buy media where they're comfortable buying it. So people are comfortable buying, use iTunes. Some people use Amazon. So you want to be on. Generally, the general recommendation is to be on as many platforms as possible, so that people have a choice of where to access your content. But there's some cases, as I said earlier, if it makes sense to sell it direct, like Louis C.K.
Mm-hmm.
We already have people who have large audiences.
Mm-hmm.
They've done very well by connecting directly to the audiences. Like that case is a great example of where he offered his comedy special to his supporters, $5 each. Within a day, I think he had sold $1 million worth, or
Mm-hmm.
a couple of days, something like just went crazy. So, and he has that connection to the audience, and it's like he made a lot more money on that than he would have in a lot of other different ways. So,
And had complete creative control to do whatever the heck he wanted.
Exactly. So, but for others, and maybe later he then took that same thing and gave it to a distributor and aggregator who put it up on the rest of the platforms, so that you can sometimes window it in such a way that your audience gets it first, personally from you. Although a lot of the platforms now for smaller films are not happy about that. They want to be, they don't want it sold on the market before they have, before they're able to sell it. But no, I work with aggregators all the time. I generally recommend it, most people want to be on those platforms. So, that's kind of the way to go in general. So
now, do you see traditional, or do you think traditional distribution is just going to die off in the next 5 to 10 years, like what we know as a traditional distributor today, or is it just going to morph?
I think it's just going to constantly change. I don't know what a traditional distributor is anymore. I think
Right.
they're all changing too. So maybe there's some that are traditional, and some of those are going a little bit away. The ones that won't change, I think, are kind of like, shrinking and going away.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them are pretty savvy and are adjusting to the marketplace. So, and a lot of it's interesting how what used to be known as aggregators, who are becoming distributors, and they are kind of like, a lot of what they do is what you would say is a traditional distribution model.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just becoming that now. So
it's morphing. It's shifting.
Yeah, but I think there's certain aspects about distribution that there's. Look at it this way: the thing is, it used to be one size fits all.
Yeah.
Or at least people thought it was one size fits all. I think there's a lot of films that suffered from being treated that way. And then now there's many, many ways to release films, and so you can, I think it's really important. It's great that people have the opportunity to do this, and it's really important for people to choose, the right path for their film.
I think in a lot of ways that it's been such a, over the last 100 years, film has been done one way. It was shot on film, it was distributed one way, and it was done. And then slowly things have been changing, and it's becoming so rapid. Like before, it was the invention of video cassette, and that changed TV and all that stuff, and people started shifting with it. But now things have changed. They're changing so fast, and the technology is moving so quickly that now, a kid who had never shot anything has access to a 6K camera, to go shoot off a movie. And I think a lot of people it's kind of like the Wild Wild West. People are just like, they don't know what to do. Like, and I mean, everybody, the studios, the filmmakers, the creators, no one really has an idea yet. And they're all just trying to figure it out. And then like, oh, look over there. He made money. Let's do what he does. And oh, look over there. He did it. So it's kind of like everyone's looking for a silver bullet. But the thing is, I think in my opinion, there's just hundreds of different kinds of silver bullets. Depends completely, like you've been saying, all on your film, all on the filmmaker to be able to get it out there. One way could work great for one, but not work for another. But it really is nuts. The more I talk to, gurus like yourself, I find that's like, it is really the Wild Wild West, like especially in distribution. Online distribution is changing daily.
Yeah, that's true, but a lot of the fundamental principles are still the same,
right?
So, or at least the same as what I was talking about 5 years ago. And but yeah, things change. Things are changing drastically. But like for instance, in my book 6 years ago, I kind of pointed out how digital, traditional digital and broadcast were going to collapse into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what we're seeing in this last year, is that actually happening. And where, there's television reviews for Netflix shows,
well, they're nominated for Emmys. I mean, they've won Emmys and all that. It's crazy.
So it's all, they're all competing with each other. They're essentially the same, which is why in the book, I basically classified all that as digital, that broadcast is digital, just like, it's a different version of AVOD or SVOD, essentially, is what broadcast is. Your cable channels are essentially SVOD. It's subscription video on demand. Now, you don't generally are able to demand them like that, but you can if you set the timer, or if you have access to the show. A lot of those shows are on video on demand. So, it's like all that's kind of blended, but to me, it's not so much of a surprise. It's just a matter of how you, react to those changes,
Do you see a future basically where an indie filmmaker is basically, and I think that future is here, but that they're their own studio. They're basically little mini Disneys. They, just create a YouTube channel or a website and just start pumping out content and connecting to the audience.
Definitely people doing that already. Yeah.
Right now, so and in the future, even more so, and might be the standard as opposed to what's going on now.
I don't know. I mean, I think there is talking to there's certain. I mean, I think there's going to be certain things that kind of rise to the top in a sense, and will be released in ways that feel familiar to you. So
interesting. Like an example.
Oh God!
Like obviously a big studio movie that costs $250 million is not going to be released on YouTube.
Look at Tangerine, for example, which was shot on an iPhone. It's at Sundance and then gets picked up and then gets traditional distribution. I think and then that's another thing that causes everyone to think of the golden ticket.
I know not everybody with an iPhone now thinks they're going to make Tangerine and get a deal.
But the reason Tangerine was, successful, not because of it being shot on an iPhone, not because it was made for whatever money, not because of it was a good story, well told, with compelling actors, and it caught people's imagination and it spoke to people. So I think that's, I think, again, you can talk about distribution all you want, but you still have to make something that people want to watch, and engage with. And that's either you're connecting to an audience that wants content, specific kind of content, or you're making something that just, speaks to whatever size of audience, and connects with them, and so, yeah, I think,
Okay.
yeah.
So I asked this question of all. This is going to be the toughest question of the interview.
Okay.
So prepare yourself.
You saved it for last.
I always ask this. Yeah, this is our last question. So, what are your top 3 favorite films of all time?
Oh my God. I have a list of like 25.
It doesn't have to be in any specific order.
I guess the top 3 my top favorite films of all time that are going to come out of my mouth now are just the ones I'm actually thinking about.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I always ask. I know there's no definitive. I'm not going to hold you to this.
I usually always say Touch of Evil.
It's a great film.
Just because I always like to piss people off by not picking Citizen Kane.
Oh no, of course. No.
So
I had a friend of mine who's a DP, an ASC DP, and I had him on the show, and I asked him the question. I was expecting some really obscure European, arty farty stuff, and he's like, "Oh, Enter the Dragon was one of my favorite," and I'm like, "Wow!" So it just all depends on what movie did for you at that point.
Yeah. So
Touch of Evil.
I wouldn't say Enter the Dragon. Let's see. There's, and also I often pick the director. It's like, who are my 3 favorite directors, and then pick a film that's most meaningful at that time. So, I'd have to do, 2001 or The Shining, for Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, wow, it's going to be hard to pick number 3 out of all this. Like, do I go with Fritz Lang? Do I go with Scorsese? Do I go, even Tarantino, even though I hate to, Pulp Fiction's pretty amazing.
Sure.
I'd probably go with Scorsese just because of Raging Bull and Taxi Driver.
Right.
Are 2 of the most amazing films ever made. And so if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Raging Bull.
Mm-hmm.
If I was forced to.
Sure, of course.
In a darker mode, I maybe would have picked Taxi Driver.
It depends on the mood you're in that day.
Yeah, you'll notice there's no comedies.
Yeah, generally I've yet to hear a comedy in a top 3. Yeah. Generally, people take film seriously.
Well, you need to talk to some more
comedians.
Comedians are kind of, because probably a lot of them will say Caddyshack.
Oh God, it's a great flick. Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, that hasn't really stood the test of time for me, I have to say. Although I still remember the bean eating scene from when I was a kid.
Great scene.
And, yeah.
There's a lot. Now, being a Kubrick fan, I always like asking this because since you mentioned Kubrick, what's one of my favorite Kubrick films? It happens to be Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh my God! When you said that, I knew this was a setup because, first of all, when you said Kubrick, I have to talk to you about Kubrick. I was saying it's going to be something about Eyes Wide Shut. So, and then anyway, I can't believe that's one of your favorite films.
Well, it is one of my. It's not in my top 3, but it's one of my favorite Kubrick films. And you don't like Kubrick? You didn't like that one?
Oh my God! It was just like, I just ignored that film. Basically.
Oh, okay. So hey,
from Kubrick, it's just kind of like, okay.
That was
little misstep at the end. I'm not going to think about it, And I don't know what happened here.
It was a colossal mistake. We don't know what happened. He was senile at the end.
No, I don't really. I don't blame it on that. I'd blame it on Tom Cruise before I blamed it on Kubrick's senility. Although I thought he did it okay for what he was supposed to do. I just think it was like a bit of a misfire and plot and story and concept.
Well, like I said, like that's the beautiful thing about film. Everyone's has every film hits the art hits a person. Two different people hit art 2 different ways.
Yeah.
So regardless of it, so where can people find you and find out what you're doing?
People can find me if they're interested in me consulting with them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a site called Hybrid Cinema that's going to be revamped soon, but kind of shows some of the films I've worked on and has a link to have a consultation with me, like a short consultation, see if it makes sense working together.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get that through jonreiss.com. which, the strategy or consulting link will link to that. And you can find out something about me there. And there's also contact. And then you can also, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook.
You do workshops as well, don't you?
Yeah, not as much anymore for right now. There's something that might be happening soon, which will change that. But, I mainly now participate in the IFP Filmmaker Labs. I'll go to events, I'll do panels and stuff like that. But I've started doing more of these short kind of master classes. So those I still do occasionally. But I do, I do those occasionally. But I'm just generally so busy kind of like, consulting with filmmakers these days that, doing a workshop kind of takes a lot of time out. And, it just like then I'm backlogged with client work. And so I don't really, I really try to just focus on going to certain festivals and events that, I should be at and, be on some of just do some things there. But occasionally I'll do some, I'll probably do something. I did a masterclass with the IDA last year. I think, that was pretty well received. So I might do something with them again in the spring, just like a 3-hour morning class.
And can you list off the books you wrote so people know which books you wrote?
I wrote Think Outside the Box Office, which is either available from my site or from Amazon. If you get it from my site, you'll be on my email list, and generally I do kind of like case studies or, kind of try to do extensive blog posts, updates, in my email list. And then I co-wrote Selling Your Film Without Selling Your Soul.
Great book.
And Selling Your Film Outside the U.S. And I co-wrote that with the folks from the Film Collaborative, Sherry Candler, Jeff Winter, Orly Ravid, and then oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the fourth author of the second book, Wendy Bernfeld.
Okay.
Yes. So so in a sense, it's like Think Outside the Box Office is a little bit of a roadmap kind of, and then the other books are kind of case studies, kind of illustrating. And that's in my mind. My co-authors would probably scream at me right now, but that's, there certainly weren't enough case studies in Think Outside the Box Office, and partially because not enough people had done anything by then. And, and then the two other books are chock full of case studies, but also, there's also not everything's a case study. There's like analysis of certain, kinds of, distribution, like Sherry Candler in the first book does this amazing thing on, kind of not peer-to-peer sharing your film online and how that can potentially benefit your audience development and, kind of like counterintuitively, increase your monetization. Then she uses a number of different examples, but all within, a paradigm that she's exploring. So that's also quite interesting.
It's like, it's the Wild Wild West. We're all just trying to figure it out at a certain point.
Exactly.
Jon, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time.
It's good to be in the Wild West. I mean, we're in this time period where we're not like in the old West, and we're not homesteaders, and the food's better, and we're not going to get shot, and there's doctors to cure any diseases. So it's like it's a much kinder, gentler Wild Wild West than what used to be. It's
like being in the film business in the 30s is a far cry to being in the film business in the 90s even, or even today.
Yeah. So, no, definitely. Yeah.
So thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate taking the time.
Yeah. Great.
Man, I really appreciate Jon taking out the time to come on the show and dump all of those gold nuggets on us, the Indie Film Hustle tribe. He has a real unique way of doing things as far as film distribution. We could all learn a lot from him. So if you want to get links to his work, his books, and his website, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/043 for the show notes. And guys, don't forget, if you love the show, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us a honest review of the show. It helps our rankings so much on iTunes and really helps the show get to more and more people that need to hear it. So I really appreciate you taking out the time to do that. So keep that dream alive, keep that hustle going, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.